Yeah, for me, it started with the VA loan on the military side of the house. From coming from my background, didn't have a whole lot of financial literacy. Even having an electrical engineering degree coming out of college, I didn't understand credit. I didn't understand the real estate market, stocks, how to evaluate a business, and those kind of basic financial staples that you need in order to be a savvy investor. I didn't have that, and I got my credit together after having a family member have to sign on my lease in my first duty station in Warner Robins, Georgia. And over the next 10 months, I got my credit together. Then got presented with the opportunity to buy one side of a duplex for all of a whopping 65,000 back in
Mm.
2006, man. And that just kind of set me on that trajectory with looking at real estate, digging in, read Rich Dad Poor Dad, joined my local real estate meetup, and just kind of kept taking those actions and steps to kind of build up over time.
Uh, so let's go to that. Was it a duplex? Was it as a house? What did you do for the first VA loan?
Yep. So it was one side of a duplex. So a good buddy of mine, shout out to Nick Battle. We were lieutenants together. He found the property, and he was like J2. He was like, man, you got to buy one side, and I'm gonna buy the other side. And I was like,
Mm.
man, I'm looking at the deal. I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna be spending less than $300 less than what I'm paying for my apartment right now. So I'm like, let's go, and I don't have to bring money to the closing table, so it was a no brainer. And I learned a lot after going through the deal and kind of stepping into faith with that whole process, and then learning more about it, and knowing that I was leaving there and I could rent it out for more than my mortgage and continue to get paid, the tax advantages, the debt pay down, and then the eventual appreciation over time. It just made a lot of sense.
Okay, so I love that. What was your, and I always ask this question too, what was your major takeaways from your first couple like purchases, and what have you learned? What was something that you learned on your first couple purchases?
No, great question. I think the big takeaway for me was just going through the process. My second VA loan purchase when I changed duty station was a foreclosure. So I bought a HUD foreclosure with my VA loan, and the next one 2.5 years later, I was another HUD foreclosure that I was able to buy with my VA loan. And so for me, it was just really going through the process. I really was kind of consumed with my, doing well in my career, moving around, and it really took me almost 8 years before we really kind of bought our true rental property, and then really started becoming an active investor over time. So I think the biggest thing for me was just really taking action as I moved duty station, kind of little small actions and continuing to learn, but then eventually getting to the point where I felt comfortable with the transactions.
Um, so let me go back just a little bit because not everybody knows this. What is the VA loan and why is it so good?
Yeah, so I think the VA loan is a tool that you have, or a benefit rather, that you have as someone who served active duty for, I think, the minimum of 90 days or maybe 120 days. For reservists, you
Yep.
come on orders and you served and you have that benefit, and it allows you to purchase a property up to 4 units. I didn't know that way back then, but you can actually get up to a quadplex with your VA loan. And it's 100% financing. That's the other great perk about that. It's 100% financing. You don't have to bring money to the table, and they really work with you from a credit perspective as well too. Just because the government is backing the loan, that a lot of the credit score requirements, they're a lot lower compared to a conventional and some of the other programs out there. So there's a lot of barriers that have been removed, that where they want you to actually take advantage of that VA loan and come in. So I think that's a great tool for any veteran or active duty military member to use especially to get started if they don't own anything right now.
So one stat that really gets me is that less than 30% of all veterans use their VA loan. Why do you think that number is so small, so low?
Oh, well, I think it's simple. I think was it Hosea 6:4 just talk about people. My people perish for the lack of knowledge. I think it's a knowledge gap. People don't understand that the program and what they actually have at their fingertips in order to access it. So I think it's just a knowledge, and you would think that wouldn't be the case right now, with the proliferation of information on the internet and just people talking about it. But I think it really comes down to a knowledge, and then also just the knowledge of how to build wealth and the power of ownership and home ownership. That I think there's just a lack of that information across the board, and that I think is the largest reason why.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Definitely agree with you on that one. Because when I was in, I didn't know about it. I didn't know enough about the VA loan. I was coming up, information was not distributed like that until later on. So I definitely understand where you're coming from. And now in information age where everybody, I mean, you can easily go on the internet and look up stuff. So, um, I definitely agree with you. Okay, so let's move forward with things. What was some of your pain points moving up in your related to career, and also with the military career going on?
Yep, I think the pain point definitely is the time piece, the time commitment, especially as we scaled into starting our actual fix and flip business and becoming more active in 2015 during that time frame. It was definitely the time commitment and definitely putting the systems in place and putting the people in place. The first deal was it was a great learning experience, but after that we took the show on the road and started flipping houses virtually down in Birmingham, Alabama, which was a little bit over 10 hours away from where we were at when I was stationed in Northern Virginia back then. And so for me, it was really just the complexity that came with that, and being able to, kick off a project, build a team, leverage the people, boots on the ground that I had to bring it all together to kind of have a successful fully renovated home that's ready to go in the retail market at the end of all that. And so I think that was the biggest thing for just time management, but then also being able to put a team together from scratch.
So you did a lot of mobile, fix and flipping, and so what was the hardest part about team building? Was it just that lack of for you not being there, or the trust factor? What was some of that really you had to move forward with?
I think definitely, thinking through that question, it was definitely not being there and putting the right people in the right place. You can get referrals from other investors. You can get recommendations, and you get your estimates and talk with them. But a lot of times, you unfortunately you won't know until you actually have them on the job. You see how they perform, and so that was one of the things, the learning pains up front with that first project going through, and subsequently after that the projects got a lot easier because I knew what subs and what contractors I could depend on for my next projects. And so, but you continue to learn and evolve. So I think the biggest piece was really just after having that proof of concept with certain individuals and seeing how they operate in that environment, and whether or not we work together as a good team and I can depend on them. From there, just kind of making that transition of like, okay, keeping who you're going, where you're constantly drafting people, and some people are, whether they're being retired or wherever they're going, you're filling those gaps as you need to on your team.
Right, right. Um, just for my question, I know you said you had a buddy who, when you first started, you had one half, your other half.
Mhm.
Was it something that you guys talk about as officers about, doing getting a VA loan, or like, doing real estate and things like that as you went up the ranks, your
Over
fellow
time,
colleagues?
yeah. So at that time, no. That was kind of random. He was looking, he already was looking, saying, "Hey, I need to buy a house while I'm here, stationed here." With that, but over kind of during that time frame, the next year or two, we definitely had some of the prior enlisted officers that kind of had get-togethers at their house where we talk about real estate investing. Shout out to Ray Bradshaw, that he was one of those pseudo mentors during that time in Warner Robins that kind of brought especially the minority officers together. Whereas that we talked about real estate. He was kind of the OG. Had been around the block. Already had a nice real estate portfolio, and so he was definitely providing wisdom and insight to us youngins that didn't know a whole lot, because I didn't have that knowledge, and there's a lot of other people in that same boat. But we kind of had that networking where you could learn about it and you get schooled on it. Then from there, it's like, hey, you got to take action. Once you get the information, it's on you.
I love that. I love that somebody was mentoring you guys and showing you guys the ropes, and you guys benefit from that. I love that, man, because that's something I didn't see when I was in. People took people to the side and really taught them things outside of the military. Besides the being a person and living and expenses, but talking about finances and things like that was something that I felt was lacking. That I've seen a lot of people do. So I love that what they were doing with you guys and showing you guys the ropes. Um, so you started when you said when did you got your first property?
'06. Yep,
Okay,
2006.
okay. So did you have any problems or any hiccups during the downturn in '08?
I didn't. I didn't. That was the only property that I owned during that time frame, and we didn't
Mm-hmm.
pick up our. We benefited from it a couple years later when we picked up our next property in January of 2011, in the Newport News area. But during that time, it was just I was continuing to learning. Attending the reinvent events, and I had my job. For as Uncle Sam, so I didn't have to worry about being laid off. And you're kind of on the sideline just looking, and so
Mm-hmm.
and that's one of the things looking back that I didn't see the opportunity because I didn't have the knowledge. That whereas that not 09, 10, 11, those were great buying opportunities to buy a lot of assets at the bottom of the market that I missed out on because I didn't have knowledge. But hindsight is always 2020.
Right, right, right. Okay, so moving forward, where does your career go at as far as you in real estate into the mid 2010s up to 2020?
Yep. So we bought the next couple moves. We bought HUD foreclosures with my VA loan up in 2013. My next true rental that we bought, our first section, we bought a Section 8 property from somebody with a tenant in place for 25K. I remember like it was yesterday. Avenue K down in Birmingham, and then after that we bought a house on the auction there. I think it was Hub Zoo for like $6,400 on the auction, and sight unseen.
Uh,
And kind of went through the mental analysis. Like, okay, somebody lived here a year and a half ago, so it can't be in that bad a shape. And so we actually put in about 14,000. Then we rented it out for like $800 a month. And
mm,
so we were landlords like that. And when we got to 2015, we cashed out. We cashed out and sold both of those properties, and we did our first fix and flip in Alexandria, Virginia. Um, to this date, that was the most extensive flip that we have done. From just the we had black mold in there, we had a swimming pool. We had to go all the way down to the studs, of course, with the black mold for that whole floor, and we had to build it back up. And for your first flip and kind of going through that whole process, it was about 35 minutes away from where I worked, and was a little bit probably about 50 minutes from where I lived at. And so it was some long days, traveling after work, seeing the progress that the team was making. But that pushed us. They gave us a lot of knowledge that we took and still take with us to this day. Then from there we started virtually flipping 16 and 17 in Birmingham, just buying a house, completing the project, selling it, then looking for the next deal. And then what really kind of took off for us was after we moved to Tyndall Air Force Base in Panama City, Florida in 2017. I got hit with orders to deploy about 3 months after coming there. And so March of 2018, I deployed, came back in September. I found out like 2 weeks before I left that we were having our third child. And so I got back in early September. And then category 5 Hurricane Michael hit the Panama City area October 10th of 2018. That kind of changed our life. And overnight, I was cold calling from Kuwait when I was deployed. I had just started doing some wholesaling because I knew I couldn't put a team together before I deployed, but I still wanted to do deals, work on my marketing. And so I was still doing things, even though I was deployed, working with the wife up until a certain extent. Then, I found out about having virtual assistants. So I hired a virtual assistant before I got back home and had got consistent with my marketing. And then boom, 3 weeks later, the hurricane hit, and overnight we were displaced. We moved around for 6 months, going Airbnb and different rentals. My third child was born 5 days after the hurricane hit.
mm,
And so after we got back in the house and going through that whole process was overnight, I realized, man, you got thousands of dilapidated houses right here everywhere in the town. And so ever since then, we've been doing between 10, 12 houses a year. We bought our first multifamily in 2020. Just recently closed on another one in Montgomery, Alabama earlier this week. And we just been continuing to just grow ever since, and at the same time, provide value, provide quality housing in that market as we continue to rebound from that hurricane.
Yeah, my cousin was there. She stationed attendant as well during a hurricane, and yeah, so they had a little bit of damage, not a lot, to their home. And then shortly after, a couple, like a little bit later on, they went to Korea. It was Korea for a couple of years. Now they in Montgomery.
Okay.
So yeah, man, that's something else right there. And it's not bad, but seeing how you guys benefit from the hurricane. I mean, there's going to be opportunities for people, and people can't be afraid to take the opportunity for that. I mean, things are going to happen. We have natural disasters. I mean, look, if you want to be smart about it, it's the waters are getting warmer. It's going to be more hurricanes. Look at Fort Myers. There's opportunities in Fort Myers to rebuild that city.
Yep.
There's going to be opportunities for a lot of people to do that if they're smart and really take advantage of it. And don't look at it as trying to be greedy or I'm trying to go for money, but you're actually helping our community. So I love what you guys did, man. That's awesome right there. So going up to 2020, anything with COVID and that, or how did that affect you and your business?
We hit the pause button a little bit on the single family side, but that was more so because we had got our first apartment. But for everybody knows that March was kind of that pivotal month when everything kind of took a life of its own as things started shutting down. And I think we went under contract March 3rd to buy our 18 unit in Panama City. So you're going through that. The end of March, everything's starting to shut down. We're going through due diligence. We're going through that process. They had to make some renovations to the property. They had to replace all the water meters and the water line that was leaking on the property. So that kind of pushed time out. And so it took us a little bit over 3 months to close on the property during that time, which it was scary. People, you were hearing other multifamily people talking about, hey, we got to bring a year of reserves to the closing, or the bank walked away from our loan at the closing table. Because there was just so much uncertainty. I know a few of our hard money lenders on the single family side that kind of just shut down and just stopped because there was just so much unknown in the marketplace. But we had aligned with the local credit union we had worked with before, and they were great partners to have on the team, and they helped us get the deal done. And so that was a little nerve wracking. But it worked out really well. We went full cycle with that and refinanced June of this year, a little bit past the 2-year mark on that deal, and we did the refinance. And and still after that, we've been continuing to still do deals and add value, because with the hurricane, it put a different dynamic where our supply kind of really dropped down extremely low, and so we definitely being able to flip houses and sell houses, because my strategy at that point was like, okay, with the tax benefits, it makes sense. Sell as many single families as we can, cherry pick a couple rentals, but then just take that profit and buy multifamily with it. And that kind of evolved into our strategy that we've been running with for the last few years.
Was there any tenant problems, anything like that, when you first got an apartment? Because I mean, some people wasn't paying, rent. I heard a majority of people said people were paying rent, but any problems with that, when you first got that property?
When we had to work with a few people, and I'll tell you. So I knew I had orders. My orders were delayed to leave there to come back to the DC area, and so I chose to manage that 18 unit myself for the first 6 months, since I knew I was leaving eventually. And so that was a interesting experience. Kind of working with all the tenants, the residents. They all knew your name. We did have some that had late payments. I never charged anybody any late fees. We did have one tenant that got to the point they were always behind, and they fell behind a few $1,000s. But overall, like you said, the majority of people paid on time, or they're a couple weeks behind, and because it was dynamic. A lot of people were losing jobs, and you just have to work with people to understand where they are and meet them where they are. Whereas that you can keep them in place, but they can also understand your side of it. Whereas that they're actually putting forth good effort to pay their monthly rent. So all in all, I think we still kind of hovered around 92% for as our collection rate during that time. So we were extremely blessed.